The SEO ROI conversation has been going on for years. Let's get a new take on it and what the obligations are of the C-suite buy-in with Kevin Indig, Director of SEO at Shopify, today on The Edge.
Go! Your weekly digital marketing trends with industry trend-setting guests. Powered by your digital marketing pioneers, Site Strategics. This week's featured guest is Kevin Indig, Director of SEO at Shopify. Now, here's your host, Aaron Sparks.
All right, this is Edge of the Web Radio. I'm your host, Aaron Sparks. Every week, we bring amazing guests to speak with on all trending digital marketing matters, especially SEO, search engine optimization. That's one of our core focuses, or foci. How about that? Yeah. On our show. We unpack key marketing topics for our digital marketing audience. And whether you're part of an agency or a freelancer or part of a firm or organization that marketing is your key factors in key disciplines, this show is for you. Be sure to check out all the shows over at edgeofthewebradio.com. That's edgeofthewebradio.com. We've got a plethora of videos and audio. We've been doing this a little while here. This is our 9th year of broadcast for Edge of the Web, and we certainly implore you to go back through the annals of our content. We've got show videos and audio and show posts for each and every show. The show is actually brought to you by the title sponsor of the show, Site Strategics. We're the pioneers in agile digital marketing with core specialties in technical SEO, content SEO, search engine marketing, search engine or social media marketing, conversion rate optimization, as well as the omni-channel media broadcasts, of which we're doing a good deal of that right here from our studios in Indianapolis, Indiana. So we actually take video, audio, curate the heck out of it, be able to push it into social media nuggets, multiple different types of blog and structural content, as well as the audio framework that we move each and every week. We actually have 2 shows every week, so check out our news show as well. So we cover all the digital marketing news of the week as timely as we can get it. Drop it on Tuesday of each and every week. So check that out, but make sure that you come back around to our Thursday drops to be able to check out these great interviews that we're having with some stellar guests on a regular basis. So we certainly appreciate any type of reviews or recommendations out in the ecosystem. That's how we do our marketing. So if you feel up to it, give us a like or a review on iTunes. It certainly makes our day and affects the algorithms there as well. Want to let you know who's coming up on the show here soon. We're going to be talking to Carolyn Leiden as well as Pedro Diaz, talking about a number of things in SEO as well as news inside of digital marketing, because there's a constant flow of that coming out of search engine land. Check out the recent shows we've done with Jason Barnard as well as Craig Campbell. And if you're interested in being part of the show, let us know. We can certainly get you on and talk to you a little bit about if there's a good match. So email us over at info@edgeofthewebradio.com. That's info@edgeofthewebradio.com, and set your reminders on YouTube to get notified whenever we post our videos. So make sure you check that news show out regularly. That said, we want to pivot around and let's talk to this week's industry expert, Kevin Indig. He's a director of SEO over at Shopify. Kevin Indig actually has helped companies, acquire up to over 100 million users over the last 10 years. He's been the VP of content over at G2, a mentor for growth at German Accelerator, and ran SEO at Atlassian, as well as a Daily Motion. He's also in the trenches regularly talking about SEO. And even on the technical SEO front, shares a lot of his knowledge and experience on social media and through blog content. He's a speaker and speaking at many SEO conferences over the last few years. And he's got a great technical SEO podcast, Tech Bound Podcast. So check that out. There's the picture of who Kevin is. Let's bring Kevin on the show here real quick. Kevin, how you doing today, sir?
Aaron, I am doing very well. How about you?
I am riddled with coffee, so hopefully I did your intro do justice here. But maybe we need to go back and kind of slow play me.
No. You did a fantastic job. I would want to keep it that way.
Oh, challenge accepted, sir. So we certainly want to dig into understanding your role at Shopify. But first and foremost, can you tell us how you give us your history in your own words of how you've gotten into the SEO game?
Yeah, sure. So the quick take is that as in my early teens, I was very encapsulated by video games. And when broadband internet became available in Germany, I played online tournaments with my friends. And in order to register for tournaments, you needed a website.
And that was StarCraft, if I'm not mistaken, right?
StarCraft, absolutely, yeah. Favorite game, Counter-Strike, and everything in that universe.
Oh, yeah.
And it's funny because Shopify just recently announced their own esports team, so it's kind of coming like full circle.
Oh, wow!
15 years later, on that.
Do you still have your game? Are you going to be part of that team?
No, I'm way too bad to even hang with these.
What is that sweet spot age bracket for the skills?
Oh yeah, I'm way past the peak there. No. Those are absolute professionals, and it's stunning.
It blows
what
your
they
mind.
do. It's absolutely fascinating. The reaction times, the strategic thinking.
Yep.
It's the next level. But it's a nice kind of coming home type of feeling for me, because it was my introduction to SEO. And so I was the guy to figure out how to build websites. That led me on the path of SEO.
Yep.
And then was very lucky to work on the agency side and the consulting side for first couple of years of my career, and then switched over to the in-house side.
Sure.
Currently at Shopify, before at a company called G2, which is a B2B software marketplace. And before that, I was part of Atlassian, where I built SEO and a couple of other inbound channels up.
Very good, very good. And Atlassian obviously has a great product. Jira, in fact, we operate from our Jira platform here for all of our sprint marketing work that we do at Site Strategic. So fantastic evolution of that product, and so hopefully you've been part of that over time.
Yes, we did a lot of work. Jira is clearly the cash cow and the flagship product of Atlassian, and it was fantastic to work with such a product. And it actually reminds me a lot on Shopify. Both companies are very product-driven or product-led, and they are still run by the founder or founders. And they have a very similar culture. It's a very engineering, nerdy, rational. I don't want to say rational, but rationalizing type of culture.
Very good, as opposed to led by the marketing vision quest individuals that run over there without any respect to the engineering bridge that you have to create to get there, right?
Exactly, or the sales team. Also worked with sales or for sales-driven companies, and that's his own kind of game. But I appreciate the engineering type of model.
Fantastic. All right. Well, you are the director of SEO over at Shopify. You just got that position just recently, so you're fresh off the boat, getting in here, and you're starting to muck about. What are your what's your job consist of, and what are some of the responsibilities of the director of SEO over there?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. We have one centered goal that SEO goes after, that basically every team in the growth organization goes after. Besides that, my responsibilities are to basically lead everything that has to do with SEO, right? So I have a large team of about 20 SEOs that are split into several sub-teams. And most of our responsibility is bringing new merchants to Shopify. That's really what we're out there to do. And it's also supposed to be merchants who are happy, right? Not just like signups or leads. They should stay.
Right.
And the small part of my job is also to bring more awareness for SEO to Shopify about the product, right? So we are working with a product team, or teams better said, on seeing what features can we develop in the product to make it more SEO friendly and to empower our merchants to compete in the search results with whoever they compete against. And in lots of cases, that could be Amazon, Etsy, or other aggregators.
Nothing too large as
no,
from a target.
No big deal.
Now, you guys don't give SEO consultation, but you certainly do work on the product and be able to engineer more and more towards better utilization of the tool. I mean, that's correct. You don't actually give direct consultation to merchants, right?
That is correct, yes.
Got it. Got it. So, I mean, you've got your hands in a couple of different buckets of solicitation and onboarding. And if you're ahead of 20 SEOs, my gosh, the power that you wield, man. And just the sheer fact that you could probably bring 20 SEOs as a blowtorch towards any initiative. That's a large camp, and there's a lot of companies that have nowhere near that type of brain power from an SEO standpoint. So how long has this team been together, and how long has the role of Director of SEO been there at Shopify?
Yeah, the role of SEO of director is brand new.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is that there have been SEOs at Shopify for the last 6 years, and they have done a fantastic job in bringing Shopify to where it is. And to take the next step and take it to the next level, we really have to build a machine. We have to build dedicated specialist teams that really go after all the levers that we have. And Shopify is huge, not just from the perspective of Shopify.com. We have lots of other sites and businesses and domains that we work on. So I think there is way more going on than most people realize. And we play pretty much around the world. We're not just focused on the US.
Sure.
We have a lot of countries that we're very active in, and we have a lot of potential for growth. So it is, I think, one of the largest SEO teams out there. And our aspiration is to be one of the best for sure. But there is definitely the need. And I'm even growing that team further. So we need even more people, more fresh talent, more strong people.
Very good. So there's the hiring play for the interview here. If you're interested in working for a team like that, certainly contact Kevin. But it's a rarity that you have a software team that actually has an entire group of SEOs. When it comes down to SaaS, for lack of a better description, software as a service platform. I know Morty over there at Wix is actually growing a good deal of momentum on that side, bringing SEO consultants to the platform. But there's a lot of other platforms out there that just haven't done that. So is this unique to Shopify, this type of long-term investment in SEO intellectual capital?
I would say so far, absolutely. And Morty is a friend, by the way, and I think he does a great job over at Wix. And Wix is a great product as well.
Sure, absolutely.
And then there's WordPress, and I also very much look up to Matt Mullenweg and Automatic and the brains behind WordPress. I think they don't have the same focus as us, right? It's certainly a different product, so we don't look at them as competitors necessarily. Right. But there are similar platforms out there, and I think when it comes to not just the commitment to SEO, but especially the commitment to growth, I think Shopify really leads the pack out there. We have a tremendous commitment to growth because we're very aware of the opportunity that's out there. Not just since COVID, this has been going on for a long time. Right. But we have also this year, I think, crossed a certain milestone. We've gotten on the radar of way more companies out there. So I think for the longest time of Shopify's existence, I think the company or the product was, I don't want to say underestimated, but a bit out of left field or a bit out of focus. And now that has certainly changed, and we feel that. And we think there's a huge opportunity to enable more people out there to start an e-commerce business or start their own business. Yep. And we're going after that with full force.
We interviewed Fernando Angula, head of communications over at SEMrush, and obviously so many platforms had such a change in COVID due to COVID and a lot of remote work, and SEMrush had an incredible influx of new businesses looking to them for utilizing them as a platform, but also guidance. So there was kind of an organic growth of a lot of mentorship or Sherpa-ship, for lack of a better description, of people of SEMrush employees and their knowledge panel being able to help businesses. I'm assuming that something like that happened at Shopify because people were scrambling for getting their product online. Now, obviously, you're not doing any type of SEO consulting, but did you find find, did your organization find that you had to hit that help desk an awful lot stronger over the last year and some change?
Oh, there's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
I think last year, a big part of the world, including Shopify, was catapulted 10 years into the future. There's no other ways to say that. It is an unbelievable leap. I think that those words don't even do justice. So yes, the answer is yes. And I think, for us, I think part of that is to help merchants with a problem in the moment. I think another part is just to make the product or bring the product to a place where it helps them make the right choices without even talking to a person, right? We have our customer service. I think it's pretty good. And we are there for merchants, but a big ambition that we have is to make the product so adaptable, so flexible, so helpful that merchants might not even have to talk to another person and just explore naturally all the different channels that they can get customers through and ways that they can grow their business. So there's also an onboarding component that we're certainly focusing on, and just creating content, whether that's courses or tutorials or written things that help aspiring merchants build a business.
Yeah, I mean, that's the handrail that so many new merchants have never been in the space before. That was the other major change that happened, that so many businesses that never took on the knowledge necessary to do digital marketing and to be able to create a digital merchant platform. There's a heck of a lot more novice and non-savvy individuals and businesses that had to get into that space very quickly. So your response is laudable, and certainly platforms like yourself have like you said, just been shot through a time capsule to be able to evolve very, very, very quickly. Some didn't really respond nearly as quickly as others, but we certainly are in this new space of understanding online behavior, understanding not only transactional behavior of customers, but how customers are finding the products and the businesses that you represent online. So that brings me over to kind of digging into SEO. If we could, you've had a couple recent blog posts and podcasts about ROI prediction, because if you have brand new merchants on the platform, they're certainly, if they're investing in SEO, one of the first things out of their mouths is, how do I know that I'm investing in something that's going to give me back a return? And we've had that discussion on our show for years, right? But your recent conversations and postings got me thinking. I wanted to unpack that with you, if you don't mind. Really being able to predict ROI for SEO. So you ready for this?
Yes, sir.
All right. So I mean, there's a continued set of expectations of performance from SEO that other digital marketing tactics honestly don't. They're not nearly as accountable to. Social media, you don't have an ROI conversation about social media to a particular degree. It's much more fuzzy brand type of communication, and we get it. We get that it's an engagement factor. It's a communication factor to the online world. But and on top of that, content marketing doesn't have the same level of accountability of return on investment. Why do you think that is, that SEO, and PPC aside, PPC is very, very transactional. And not to eclipse PPC, but SEO is an earned place as opposed to rented. Why do you think SEO has such a trouble connecting to business owners about return on investment?
I think there are two parts to this question, or to the answer, better said. The first part is that SEOs often have high needs and high demands to content creators, designers, engineers, right? We usually come with a set of asks and changes, and that's an investment that you make, right? You have to pay developers, designers, and writers, and you have to allocate those resources. And the connected challenge there is that in SEO, it's a bit out of our hands, not completely, but in PPC, exactly, you have 100% control, at least if you're ready to pay for it.
Sure.
On the SEO side of things, that is a bit different. We can make very educated and good predictions, but we cannot make promises about what will happen. And it's very often also a question of multiple factors coming into play together.
Absolutely.
Right? So just building links is not enough. Just creating good content is not enough. Just having a good experience is not enough. It goes hand in hand. And in a lot of cases, it makes things very fuzzy, because when you ask, for example, a team of developers to solve a SEO hygiene problem or implement redirects or those kind of things, they of course want to know, okay, what do we get in return for that? Why should we make that investment over building a new product feature or working on technical debt, those kind of things. And those conversations, without understanding how to speak dollars, as I call it, are very tricky and frustrating, and very often they're not turning out in the favor of SEOs. The second point of that is social and content marketing and PPC, as you mentioned, those all happen on other platforms. So you can create a content marketing strategy and implement it through a blog. You might have some asks to the CMS, but it's not nearly as extensive as SEOs asks. And same with social, right? You operate on other platforms, build an audience there, and then try to bring it back to your website or email newsletter or have a transaction right on that platform. So that's a unique set, and I think on top of that comes the complexity of SEO. There was a time, or at least when I started, you saw a very quick return of the investments you made or the changes you made, and you had a much clearer understanding of what has to be done.
Certainly.
That has changed a lot in the last, I would say, 5 years, whereas now you have to test a lot to see what works. And that is an additional upfront investment you have to make, and that also comes with certain questions. So our job hasn't gotten easier.
No, it hasn't, and you hit it right there on a nail on the head there, because I'm going to talk about this a little bit further on, but the connection of the key stakeholders to actually get into the experiment mindset or the testing mindset. One thing is flipping on a switch of budget, right? We're spending money or we're not spending money on PPC, but to have them have two different hats. If you follow my metaphor or analogy of one, they got to be a gardener. And there's so many scenarios where the type D, high D, or I should say, a type A business owner doesn't want to even have that moment of time to understand that it's a long burn, a long investment. But now you're having them wear another hat, which is the mad scientist hat of, hey, we're going to get this wrong. We know this is going to be failing, but we're going to test it anyway to eliminate the variables. The business owners, or those stakeholders, they're not wired that way to be the mad scientist farmer. Is that what I'm merging together as an analogy? There we go. I'll stick with that. So how do you get them to, I mean, they're like a stranger in a strange land whenever you're asking them to do that type of commitment. How do you get them to, how do you persuade them to at least trust you and maybe take on some of that mantle?
That's a great question. I like your analogy there, because it's very true. SEOs have to be very adaptable in 2021 and play many different roles. And so there are a couple of ways to create trust with somebody who makes the call or makes the investment. One of them is to just try things out at a small scale. Instead of saying, okay, what happened? Like, we should change these 100,000 titles or content on these 100,000 pages. Yep. What happens when we do it on 1 or 5 or 10? What are the results, right? That creates trust, because you can show people that there's an impact towards your suggestion, that basically just have to roll it out. Another one is to show the potential of the opportunity. And I think that's where a lot of times I don't see the necessary effort put in to build a reliable model. There you go. A lot of times, you go, hey, these are our most important keywords. What's the CPC? So that's the value of SEO. Not exactly true. Like I think you can and should go much, much deeper beyond that and really make that model more relatable to the business model, right? Like, are we selling subscriptions? Is it an e-commerce business model? Is it about ad impressions? And what does that mean? And how does it convert? Right. So showing a good plan with tons of opportunity can also create a willingness to invest. And then a lot of times it's also about education. SEO has, I don't want to say has always been a black box, but there was always a certain mystique around SEO and a certain degree of misunderstanding.
Well, on top of that, SEOs really didn't want to share their tools with others.
There is, yeah, sure.
Because we are the masters of the universe, right? So I mean, there's that too, right?
You have to take our responsibility here, right?
Absolutely.
That's the only way to see it. So we haven't done a good enough job in doing that. And I'm a very big advocate of saying that we have to take more responsibility in educating the C-suite or just people in general, right? Like, I mean, as an executive myself, we don't have the time to go out and read 50 blog articles and educate ourselves about these kind of things, right? It has to be on point, it has to be available, and you have to advocate for SEO. And that's also part of my role at Shopify, is to beat the drum for SEO, show people what it can look like, what good SEO is, and what the opportunity behind it is. You know, I think I recently had that discussion on Twitter, and I think it's very ignorant to pretend that everybody should have this awareness for SEO and should make an investment into SEO. It's just a small part of the universe that competes with 1,000 other things that you could do. So it's our job to educate people.
It is. I think it's also the job of the SEO to move away from the focus on keyword ranking, the maturity of performance, maturity of understanding of performance truly has to go beyond where that positioning is, because we all know that key rankings and even insight towards buyers' intent on those keywords isn't the place. It's about, and you mentioned it in your blog article, the traffic TAM, the total addressable market for either a page or a cluster of pages, or on top of that, the entire site as a whole. And you're right, experimenting on small positionings of smaller sections of a website, getting that user or that stakeholder bought in. And identifying the measurable factors, not just key ranking, but also understanding the volume of traffic that's out there. And you mentioned a couple tools in your blog, and I think just a recent podcast you talked about it. There's Ahrefs, there's SEMrush, to be able to see volume opportunity out there. Do you have any tools that you recommend to be able to get a picture of what the horizon is, as soon as you can point that direction and say, you know what, if we actually change this structure in this way, we could have a new volume of market share come in? What would you recommend as how to transfer that knowledge? Because that's one of the key points of persuasion for the stakeholders. Yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's hard to call it a specific tool. I think it's more how to set up your projects in those tools and then what to do with that. So I've used all the classic SEO tools from SEMrush, Ahrefs, Moz, Stat, which I think is often underrated, and there are definitely a couple of others out there as well. And so the tool is not as important as, first of all, how you set up your projects. And I think, you know, what I really like is how you mentioned that just focusing on keyword rankings is not enough. However, a lot of the methodology still is based on keywords. And so, for example, one thing you should really make sure of is to build out groups of keywords with, for example, the same intent or that focus on a similar topic based on what kind of business you're really in. And then from there, as you absolutely said, as you are on point there, you then want to see what's the total volume opportunity and how can that volume convert to a business. Not every topic, for example, converts the same way. When you're a SaaS business, then you should or hopefully are present for several topics at the same time, and people or the audience that looks for those topics, they convert at different rates. That's a different quality of customers, and that's something that SEOs need to bring to the table more often. It starts with the volume, it starts with keywords and topics, but then it doesn't end there. And that's what I often see, right? People, they're like, okay, we can predict that traffic might go up to X, right? Or we can increase our keyword rankings, but what does that actually mean? What does that mean for the business? What does that mean for revenue? And that's the kind of model that every SEO needs to build out for their customer or for the business that they work at if they're in-house, and make it relatable to the bottom line. Show the executives and everybody else as well how that investment or that action contributes to the bottom line, right? How does it impact leads, signups, sales, all these kind of things? And that's the model that's a bit more important than the tool itself. And then the tool is just a means to an end.
Absolutely. And that's where the SEO actually has to take on those business model hats. And that's a responsibility. We always ask the responsibility of the stakeholders to come our direction. Now we've got to move that direction and understand, and help communicate the behavior management and observation of those particular points. You talked to Nigel Stevens here and on your last podcast about microconversions. And we're really clamped on to that because that's absolutely the bridge between the stakeholders and the SEO. Is what are those factors that we can see that are not the full-on lead generation, not the full-on transaction, but they are signals that we can see we're in the same marketplace, or we're in the space where we're growing those particular factors of a signal back to us that we're in the right space. One of a key micro conversion, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this, that's not site specific. It is site specific, but it's really behavior. There's a lot of insight tools to be able to see the businesses, the 411 lookups of businesses that come to your website over time. And as much as we're oriented towards rank tracking and building rank value and clusters of buyer intent type of rank positioning, being able to watch the behavior, almost like a core sampling of the type of businesses that are visiting your site at the beginning of a particular campaign, right? And you can do a sweet spot type of analysis of, yes, this is the market value of the campaign of that particular visitor, how many employees that company has, and it all kind of derives from what you can see from that IP visit, right, to the website. So maybe 20% of your audience that comes in there you can see, but if you set a baseline of at the beginning of a campaign, okay, 10% of the visits that we see match our goals, our goal companies, right? And then over the course of investment of ROI, then you see 6 months, 8 months later, 30% of what can be seen are matching even better to that sweet spot defined type of business that you're looking for. Isn't that a micro conversion that directly connects to the SEO investment? Sorry, that was long-winded, but I wanted to get there.
No, I love how you do your homework, and it's a very good question. The way that I think about that and the way that I saw success in that is to let go of the thought that there's just a single goal for every visitor of the website.
Yep.
And to also respect that a visit is just an event or an interaction out there. And when you open your mind that there are to the fact that there are many interactions with a brand or with a website, then all of a sudden you can expand your understanding of the contribution of SEO and the value of SEO. So what that means in concrete terms is, say you rank a blog article for a short head keyword, right? That short head keyword is searched by people with different intentions.
Sure.
Unless it's a very long phrase or a long-tailed keyword, there's probably always a little bit of ambiguity about what people are really looking for. And so that could mean that they come to your site or to your page, especially when it ranks at the top, and you might not provide what they were looking for because they just have a slightly different intention than the majority of people looking for that keyword.
Right.
However, they might be interested to a degree. And so by just basically having a black and white view of what a conversion is, you would push all visitors to a single conversion or to a single action. But you should think about what can I do for people who might not be interested in that at the moment, but might want to come back, right? Mm-hmm. Or they might want to learn a bit more first. And so that's where micro conversions can be things like newsletter signups, but can also be things like clicking on related articles at the bottom of a blog, right, or clicking through your site. And the beauty of that model is that when you lay the interactions of, say, thousands or maybe even hundreds of thousands of visitors on top of each other, mm-hmm, you see patterns. Right. And when you optimize for these patterns, you increase your hard and soft conversion rate, right? Micro conversions and macro conversions, yep, because you create better paths for people and a better understanding no matter where they come from. So, and you don't have to be, by the way, you don't have to be a huge corporation with a data science team that models this out with some, crazy linear regression models. There are ways to do this even with just like basic Google Analytics and maybe Google Search Console. They're relatively easy models you can build out, mm-hmm, and start making assumptions and then testing these assumptions, right? You can use tools like heat mapping tools. There are even some out there that are free, like Bing recently released Clarity, which is completely free. And by the way, very underestimated, super helpful tool. And just starting to create that awareness for these patterns and for optimizing for micro conversions can pay off hugely, because not everybody has the same path. And that's the last thing I'm going to say about that. The more sales driven your business is, the more that pays off. Because if you're an enterprise company, for example, that sells at a very high deal volume, you have to make sure that you squeeze the most out of every visit or interaction with your website. And so I think that's where I often see major underinvestments of companies and a lot of lost potential.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And so, I mean, to just kind of encapsulate here is that the technical SEO has to be able to get into the mindset of the sales initiatives and understand how they can bridge that gap with micro conversions, be able to see behavior well beyond what they see on a performance level of ranking and inbound organic traffic. They got to see the behavior. Otherwise, you could be pointing the entire wrong direction of attracting the visits that aren't ready to engage. But on top of that, the C-level, the stakeholders have to get into the mindset that this is not a flick of a switch. SEO is an earned right. It's a level of building authority, building trust for the consumers. And if you have a larger lens, that you're not singularly focused on transaction model, but these micro conversions actually do enhance and motivate people to actually get to a solid conversion. You have to have your peripheral eyes open a little bit further. So that's where the SEOs and the C-suite really need to forge that map together. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on there. That's, by the way, one thing that I'm really bullish on is how SEO has changed, how our approach to SEO has to change as well. And so in the classic model, you would come with a blueprint to the table, right? You come with a preconceived notion of how things have to be to work optimally for SEO to the table, and then create your roadmap based on that. However, what you and I just talked about, Aaron, this idea of mapping behavior and getting a better, finer understanding for what people actually want on your website, that's a part of the new school of SEO, how I would call it, a modern understanding of SEO, where you follow what users actually want and you open your mind to basically that anything goes, right? Anything can have an impact on SEO. And we see that a lot more in the search results, that when websites fulfill the user's intent or the user's needs are met as it is expressed in the Google quality rater guidelines,
right,
then really good things start to happen all of a sudden. But there are lots of meta factors that are difficult for us to quantify that play a role, like the design of a website, like the layout of a website, the how quickly you can get to your answer, how easy it is to read the content. It's all these smaller things that were not traditionally SEO signals or ranking signals, if you will, but that now start to play a role, right? So it goes hand in hand, this whole idea of educating the business, of tracking micro conversions, of having this new modern understanding of SEO. And that's an important thing to understand, right? Like a lot of things, I'm very involved in the SEO scene, and I speak to also lots of businesses who don't have a good understanding of SEO. And they all fall into the same type of trap, which is that they think they know what matters to a 100% confidence, and that's just not the case.
Fantastic. So we covered a lot in our first segment, and we kind of dug into that it's not about keyword ranking anymore. Performance of SEO is multifaceted. There's certainly hard conversions from a transactional standpoint, but there's soft conversions as well when it comes down to micro conversions and understanding behavior on websites that are brought in, that the organic traffic actually brings in and interacts with. So there's a responsibility for design as well to be able to have those buttons to be able to push, so to speak, be able to watch scrollable behavior, scroll and event-oriented behavior. And that's the commonality that we kind of discovered that the stakeholders and the C-suite level of individuals that are investing in SEO need to understand. It's not that linear transaction. It is a wider lens of behavior that they need to pay attention to. And at the same time, SEOs need to actually expand their horizon much more in the usability of the site, the user intent of the site, and stop looking at keyword ranking, right?
Oh yeah, big time. I think especially user intent is something that has become so much more important. It's funny because I just wrote an article this week about my journey of understanding user intent and what it means. And so about 5 years ago, and I think many other SEOs as well, noticed this change in how Google works, where all of a sudden we saw pages that were able to rank for thousands of keywords and attract a lot of traffic. And if you think about the classic approach to SEO and keyword research, you would really think about one, maybe 3 or 5 keywords that you try to optimize a page for. Mm-hmm. And while that's not completely wrong, it's also not completely right, because we noticed that pages can rank for so many more keywords. And at the time, about 5 years ago, I thought it was really related to topics, and that Google can understand the relationships between topics to a very fine degree. Sure. And that is true, by the way. They use modern natural language understanding technology and concepts like word embeddings and entities to understand relationships of concepts to a degree that is scary to humans to a part, right? So there is that technicality. But what I thought to be topics was actually user intent, mm-hmm. right? So Google doesn't necessarily cluster all queries that are very related to each other or all keywords under a topic. It clusters them under a user intent, about an intention that a user has. Right. And so by being overly focused on keywords or the one keyword, we miss a large chunk of opportunity, a large chunk of keywords that we could rank for at the same time if we get the user intent right. Now, the challenge with that is, first of all, understanding user intent, which is easier when you look at a single search, because as humans, we implicitly understand intent. Mm-hmm. We can pick it up, right? We can read between the lines. But when you try to translate that into a model or even onto a spreadsheet, it all of a sudden becomes very complicated. And so I spent the last 2 years really, digging my teeth into that topic and trying to find a way. And eventually I cracked the code and understood that when Google has an understanding of a user intent, it will do its best to answer that intent, of course. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't just do that with web search results. It also does that with certain SERP features, what I call SERP features. Right. An example of that would be a Google Map pack, would be people also ask boxes, it would be an image carousel, news, right? There are all these little integrations that I call SERP features that Google displays for certain keywords. And they display them based on what their understanding of the query is. So if somebody has a transactional intent, right? If I look for something and want to buy or have a buyer interest, for example, dog food. Right. I'm not that interested in understanding what dog food is, or so. I want to understand where on the web can I buy it, or where in in the offline world can I buy it, and that's why Google shows certain SERP features accordingly. And the same for other more informational queries. For example, if I want to learn more about dog breeds, for example, then Google will show me other types of SERP features that are not related to a transactional intent, right? So they might show me knowledge panels, or they might show me people also ask boxes, and so on and so on. Yep. So if we extract these SERP features for queries, all of a sudden we can develop a understanding of user intent at scale, meaning we don't have to manually click on every search results page and interpret what the user intent here could be. We can define it based on what SERP features Google shows, and then scale that on a spreadsheet level or build our own model of that. And so it's a long-winded answer to say, that keywords themselves are not as helpful anymore as really thinking about intent. And when you develop that understanding, you gain much more traffic simply because you rank for so many more keywords.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'll double down on what you said there. We are training Google's neural net. basically. It's understanding of topics and subtopics. And there's been a number of shows in which we've dived into those concepts, very similar to what Google's doing. And our job is to be able to see kind of the edges of the room of what Google knows, what Google doesn't know. It's constantly understanding the space. And one of the key sounding boards is looking at all the SERP features based on, with the tools that we have at our disposal. SEMrush has a fantastic tool. Ahrefs, all the ranking tool sets that are out there give us a sounding board of, yes, there's a knowledge panel. Yes, there's a PAA. Yes, there's images. Yes, there's featured snippets. That itself gives you an understanding of how well Google knows the answer, even in links to their degree. Their AI understanding of subject topic matter is actually a feedback loop of how well Google actually understands the topic at hand. You'll have a percentage mark from 0 to 100 on how well understood the subject matter is. So you're absolutely right, is being able to start seeing that sounding board of, okay, this is not just one term, it's a myriad of subtopics. This is how well Google knows this, and this is where you should actually invest in your SEO intent focal points of content plus additional behavioral next step content on your website, because there's the sweet spot. We have kind of an echo chamber, wrong term for it. We have now a sounding board of the reflection back from Google, how well it understands the subject matter, and it's showing us, no, this is where we really are communicating and giving additional guidance to its own customer, right?
Absolutely. And it's a very important point you mentioned there, which is Google's understanding, and that it changes over time. Right, it's just like our understanding as humans of things change as well. Absolutely. Right, I think the pandemic and vaccines are the perfect example of human progress, and how we learn more about different things, and so does Google. And so Google has evolved their understanding from a pure entity based approach, which, by the way, entities are things like people or books or names or sometimes even concepts. Yep. And their relationships. And now Google understands also the idea of topics. So the topic graph is something that launched, if I have my math and my data right, I think about 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. And it's the evolution of Google's knowledge graph to a topical level. And topics are not as straightforward as they often seem. Topics can be opinions or trends or, these kind of very abstract sometimes things that humans talk about, read about, and create. And exactly. So Google is really...
And it's fluid as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It is fluid, meaning it's ever-changing, ever-evolving. Mm-hmm. And from time to time, Google makes a leap forward in its understanding by developing new technology or by other factors as well.
Right.
And it means that, that can funnel into Google's ranking algorithms. And that's where all of a sudden you see a core algorithm update, and you see a traffic tank or increase, and you have no idea why. And in large part, it's because Google improved or upgraded its understanding of topics and entities.
Right.
And on the other side, on the more business side, that leads to products like Google Discover, where Google shows a feed of results that's not based on intent, meaning there is no search needed, but Google understands your preferences based on your behavior and then tries to show you results accordingly. There's more background and more reasons for why it makes sense from a business perspective for Google, but AI and natural language understanding are really the focal point of SEO in Google as a whole in the last 5 years.
There's a whole discipline of finding those points of knowledge and then being able to steer your ship, your site, your subsection, and even your pages towards those intent-oriented points. And on top of that, you also have the additional responsibility, if you are trying to capitalize on what Google's evolving to, is to be able to educate that. I mean, Google's a child, is trying to learn. We just talked to Jason Baynard, and we really used the parallel of just training and teaching a child, this is what this is, this is what this is. And if you really want to create that authority, right, which is what Google's looking for, you have to create that valuable understanding, that content that earns you backlinks, earns you the relevant authority in that space, and then Google will trust that you know what you're talking about, that you're validated in that space. There's a whole lot of unpacking that of that particular country that we could get into, but I wanted to swing back. We're in this space of discussing topics and subtopics. Obviously, subtopics are now being expanded on the knowledge panel, but let's swing it back around to what I just saw on Facebook. With minutes before going online, I saw an ad on Facebook for 102 checkpoints checklist for SEO. Right, huge landing page, jamming the user to buy this. We've seen them all, right? We're past the checklist type of process. We're past the, hey, these are all the only steps that you need to do, then your SEO is perfect. The blueprint model that you've referenced before, it doesn't exist, does it?
Yeah, that's exactly right. That did work. It used to work.
Sure.
And that's why we're, as SEOs, are so attached to it, especially SEOs who have been in the game for a while. But for me, it's a similar breaking point to modern medicine, where we say goodbye to the idea that we understand everything and we know everything, and prescribing weird potions, and instead go to a more evidence-driven approach, or what I call a zero-based approach. Right? The name itself doesn't matter as much as the idea behind it, which is to say, look, we come to an understanding that we have a very, very high-level map of where the journey should go, right? We know that content is important. We know that links are important, user experience, meaning core web vitals and all the page experience metrics. And maybe there are a couple of other things like title tag and whatever else Google officially confirms as being a ranking signal. But that's just a small part. Instead, we need to acknowledge and understand that we don't know most impactful signals, because for once, there are many meta factors or many hard to grasp factors that are hard to quantify for us. But Google also adjusts the weight of these signals based on the query. If I look for something in the financial space or insurance space, for example, Google will put more weight on signals like HTTPS or a secure connection, right? If I look for travel-related keywords, Google might put a higher emphasis on pictures or images or the written content, videos, those kind of things. So Google adjusted signals on such a fine level that for us, it's almost presumptuous to say, oh yeah, we should definitely invest our SEO resources into just creating more content, or we just need more backlinks and it will rank. We know that these things it used to work, and we know that these things are important to a degree, but we need to change our mindset and think, okay, everything goes. Let's test things, right? Let's have an open mindset and just try different things out with a commitment to the scientific method, right? Which means that we have a certain discipline and rigidity to testing things. One example is that a lot of SEO tests they're not even before and after tests. You roll out a change, you see traffic go up, and you say, oh, okay, that works. That's not enough. What you need to do instead is you need to reverse the test. You need to falsify it, which is a core staple of science, any science, not just SEO, right? Falsify that, reverse it back, which is painful because you just see that traffic increase. Exactly. But then when it comes back to baseline, then you know that it works. Then you can attribute the change back to the treatment or to the change that you made or that you rolled out.
Yep.
And so that's really what we have to go after, right? That is hard with backlinks because you don't get a backlink and then you just say, you call the site and you're like, take this off again. I want to see what the impact is. That's unrealistic. But at least when it comes to technical factors and to on-page factors, we have to hold ourselves to a higher standard and test way more. And I think there are a couple of good case studies out there already. There are a couple of good companies that show what this could look like and all the crazy things that can have an impact today, from schema to design to even what the CMS is based on. So this blueprint idea of SEO is dead in my mind and dangerous.
You're absolutely right. It is dangerous because there's a closure mentality that is endemic of just check it off, check it off, check it off, check it off, and we're done. One, SEO is not that. SEO is more like a campfire that you have to put logs on the fire to continue burning well, or otherwise you're dying off. It's not, you sit there like, I'm going to just use every analogy on the book here. It's not like just going to a mechanics list and now you're safe to ride the car. You got to be able to drive it. You got to be able to fuel it. You got to be able to steer it correctly towards destination. So there's so much that goes into it, and understanding that the road is learning you at the same time you're learning the road. You've got to be able to establish testable criteria. But if the road's changing so much, there's no control. There's no factors that you can rely on. And if the SERP is actually changing and the ranking signals for that SERP based on intent, right, you're not going to be able to. It's almost like a Dali-esque type of environment. Everything's kind of melting around you, and you really do need to have a baseline or a fundamental foundational set of SEO techniques that are the stand the test of time: core web vitals, user experience, structural taxonomy, ontology. All these things have to be foundational, and then you at least know that that's core. Let's experiment with the knowledge panel, and let's experiment with these different factors. I just don't know how many SEOs would be able to say, hey, you remember that content that we just wrote, that entire section of valuable content? Let's just turn that off and see what falls out.
Painful.
It is painful. But there are some great testing tools, and the name escapes me of the, maybe it's Distilled. I could be very wrong there, but there is literally A/B testing of titles site-wide and section-wide. It actually rolls out different content and gives us feedback on that. So there are some dynamic testing tools out there that can give us that particular type of methodology, right?
Yeah, Search Pilot.
There we go.
Yeah, exactly. Recently had Will Critchlow on my podcast, and we talked to great depth with that. And another kind of important point here to mention is that there are different types of sites, and they can employ different testing methodologies. Mm-hmm. So at G2, for example, we were able to follow a much more classic A/B testing model, where we can bucket pages with the same template into groups, make a change to one group, and then see how they divert from each other. So not always do you have to revert a change altogether. There are other ways to have control. However, when it comes to more content-driven businesses or sites, which most SaaS sites are, there are some exceptions, then you have to go with a diff-on-diff test or a before and after test, where you have to unfortunately revert the change because you don't have a comparable control. Mm-hmm. Now, there are one or two other testing frameworks that allow you to create a control. So I think that whole space of SEO testing is also growing and evolving, luckily. But I think, even if you cannot afford an expensive testing framework, right, I think there are always things that you can test on it that allow you to gain a better understanding of what works for your specific vertical.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and there are some tools that can give you a systemic change. My concern is always part of the ranking signal is some permanence of content, and if you're actually fluctuating, whatever the time period is, you're shifting gears month in and month off. Doesn't that actually send a factor of a challenge to Google, that it doesn't see the same content back and forth? And Will certainly is the specialist in this, and I'd love to understand that more. It's just, if you're actually affecting that content visibility, doesn't that in its very own rate affect the longevity of that content, which could very well be a good ranking factor? I mean, you're planting sproutlets of content and sproutlets of change, and all of a sudden you're ripping those things out. There's got to be something that you're not able to grow roots because you are actually testing at the same time.
But that's exactly the right way to think about it, Aaron. Now you're thinking with a zero-based approach, because now you understand that they don't have a linear cause and effect relationship. They're multifactorial. And so in the same way, when we test in medicine or other sciences, we don't say, this one study showed that the Pfizer vaccine is 95% efficient. We say that with so and so much confidence, we can say that this is likely to happen.
Right.
But we do factor in that there are likely other factors and circumstances that affect the outcome. And that's exactly the point, right? It's that it's acknowledging we cannot say things with 100% confidence because that would be delusional. The idea of creating or finding a 100% causality is absolutely unlikely in an environment like Google and in medicine as well. Like we have certain things that we are very confident in that they work and that we understand. But there's so much more gray and so many other things that, as you said, when we run a test, we have to acknowledge the limitations of that test in SEO. And we have to say, look, this is our understanding, but there are all these other things that could happen as well. We need follow-up testing. And then once you follow that thread, all of a sudden you find yourself in a very healthy, successful, and thriving environment in which you run a continuation of tests and evolve your understanding. And so the more tests you run for your vertical or for your site, the better your understanding, the better your body of tactics that actually work, or you are likely to work. And if you do that for a couple of years, you're in a pretty great spot, I would say.
Yeah. You're testing the ranking signals of your vertical, like you're saying, as opposed to this generalities. You're seeing what works and what doesn't in the space that you're in. And if you have the ability to test out multiple verticals, multiple channels, then you really get kind of a pinging sonar of these are stronger signals or stronger. I mean, again, it's all site related at that point in time. It's still not authority related and inbound factors. You can't really yank out links that you just acquired. That's a very difficult scenario. But you'll still get a profile or an image of what's valuable in this vertical. Yeah,
absolutely. And cool. What also happens when you do that is you do find things that have an impact, right? It's not all, you're not completely blind all the time. And then when you find them, then it's all about rolling them out as quickly as possible and making sure you save that win, right? You keep that goal.
Yep.
So you will make progress along the way. You don't have to reinvent the wheel every time until you see the results. At the same time, I think it's a much more successful and trustworthy concept because you can involve the whole company in that, right? You can have everybody bring ideas to the table. You can and should share the outcomes and the results of these tests. Show people that you operate at a high level, that you have that kind of fidelity and fidelity to SEO. I think you can get a lot more done because people see, oh wow, they don't just think they know what's happening, right? They iterate on it. They approach the optimal solution. So let's fund them so that they can get there quicker.
Yeah, absolutely. And that then gets transferred to the C-suite. They actually get buy-in because they see that you're experimenting. You're not repeating and changing up. You're literally finding your way on behalf of the entire company. You're going to have those resources at your availability. They're actually going to invest and want to learn what was the experiment and how did it play out. So that is a huge convincing or persuasive opportunity to be able to get buy-in way beyond the technical SEO lane or the programmer developer lane or that you may find yourself in a firm. I certainly enjoy this conversation. It gets us thinking of the environment that we're in. SEOs are not mechanics. SEOs have a role to play of the entire evaluation of content and performance and behavior. I think we're really in the space now that we're almost like coaches in a way to our own content. You're having to give guidance, and it's almost like the doctor analogy that you had. It's not just that doctor that's treating the patient at that point in time. They're running along with the patient and making sure that the behavior's correctly, they're eating right, they're doing their exercises right, and that applies to everything that you're doing from a digital space because it has an effect. And your mirror is Google, right? And the vertical that you're in is truly the pathway you're on is unique to your industry. But again, harkening back to Jason Baynard with Calicube, literally they have different profiles of authority for brand SERP based on different verticals. So we're seeing that there's an architecture here, and what you're talking about is being able to find the walls of that architecture. it's all about that testing. It's all about keeping track as well. And if you've got to revert back to find that wall, do it and then capitalize on it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's how product development works. That's
Absolutely.
how engineering works. That's how design works. Why should SEO have a higher, or it should be exempt for that rule, right? Like designers have to do their user research, and new features have to be tested and released to an alpha group and all that kind of stuff. Why should SEOs have the audacity to think, to come to the table and say, this is what you have to do? And then, because, on a tragic note, what I also observed, and I made this mistake early on in my career as well, is that SEOs come with bold asks and predictions to the table, and then the C-suite asks, "Okay, why do you think that works, or where's your proof?" And then SEOs get all mad and like, "Well, like, why do you question me, and why do we have to have these conversations?" Oof. Well, if you cannot defend your idea, then why should I buy into that as an executive? So, you see, I'm pretty passionate about that, Absolutely. And all I'm saying is that as SEOs, we have to take the high route and be better.
Yeah, and they have to level up their level of understanding of experimentation. And it's not a de facto checklist. And for companies that are looking for SEO agencies or marketing agencies, if they do have just a checklist, back away, because they're not in the space that a search engineer really should be in, right?
Absolutely. There's a very easy way to weed out toxic or bad SEOs and SEO agencies, and it's just hold them accountable for revenue. I'm not saying pay them 100% based on conversions and the money you make. That's not what I'm saying. Yeah. But measure the success and how much attributable revenue there is to SEO. In Shopify, we do have a first touch attribution to organic traffic. That's in every product, right? Sure. And so if you, I don't want to just speak for Shopify, but it's a good example because I'm so close to it. So if you're a merchant, right, and you have an SEO agency or an SEO who pitches you, hold them accountable for that number to go up, for you to sell more. And then it's a very easy, comfortable, and fantastic conversation to have. But if you see people shying away and saying, no, we should be paid based on organic traffic or keyword rankings, that's a red flag to me. And that's what we as SEOs have to embrace as well, right? Whether we are working in agencies or consultants, freelancers, or in-house, we have to eye revenue. We have to make sure the business grows. That's our job, right? Our job is not to rank higher. Sure, that's on the way there, but we have to hold ourselves accountable to revenue.
That's a symptom of success. It is not success into its own right.
Yes, and there are all these, there's all these nuances. There are situations where the second position or the second ranking position gets more clicks than the first one. Yep. So is your goal to get more clicks, or is it to rank high? Most of the time goes hand in hand, but not every time, right? And even just clicks don't mean nothing if that traffic doesn't convert. And even the conversions mean nothing if those customers or prospects or leads don't become customers at the end and pay. So it's a long-winded way to say revenue should be your North Star.
Very good. This is a great conversation, Kevin. I really do appreciate you unpacking some of the more meta concepts of what a search engineer should be focused on, and on top of that, understanding the responsibilities of the stakeholder, the C-level. That it's not binary, it's not linear, it's not let's do SEO for 3 months and see how it works. There's got to be an experimental mindset. You got to find your path. Right, and you have to have buy-in for everyone. That's sales, that's marketing, that's C-level, that's customer service. There's so many contributors into understanding what the buyer's need is, and how do you meet them with search as one of the preeminent, highest level of authority and persuasive points of visibility for a customer. If they see you anointed by Google, then they see that they're not paying for that opportunity to see them, but they actually are lifted up. And you're in the featured snippet. If you're in them, people also ask if you're in these knowledge panel points, Google trusts you, and that's a sacrosanct space there, and everybody needs to be playing a part there.
Yeah, I think it's a perfect summary.
Coffee riddled, but still
successful.
Thank you. Well, we certainly appreciate your time. Quickly, we want to ask you what bugs you about your industry. I think we kind of covered a bit of it.
I was going to say, we've spoken about that for quite some time. That's certainly one thing. But there are also many beautiful things about the industry. It's my career choice. I love. Every day, Aaron, I wake up grateful for what I'm allowed to do every day. especially during the pandemic, but even before that. So this industry has a lot to give. There are a lot of amazing, wonderful people. And then sometimes we're being humans and we're dealing with things like strong opinions or like outdated notions, and that just happens, right? But I think as a whole, it's a fantastic industry. A lot of willing people and able people and talented people who just try to do good work.
Very good. Very good. Well, final thought in the SEO for the SEO industry, or maybe for the e-commerce merchant. Give us a single pro tip for you.
Go direct. Go direct is my tip. Build direct relationships with the customers. Don't rely too much on other platforms. I'm saying that as an SEO who built a living off of Google, but whatever it is, make sure that if you acquire or if you build an audience and a following on a different platform, make sure you get it on a medium where you can control the relationship with them directly, like email, like even text, or what other forum or community is out there. But build direct relationships with the customers, and it's the same, with everything. Like I made a big investment in building and driving my own site and blog a couple years ago, and it paid off big time because I didn't just guest post or I didn't just invest in other people's platforms, but I invested in mine as well. So this is a tip that's not just transferable to merchants and e-commerce. There's also something for SEOs and marketers as a whole.
Very good, very good. Well, we certainly want to promote Kevin-Indig, that's INDIG.com, and also sign up for his newsletter, Growth Memo. Kevin, we'd love to have you back on the show here in the future. You game for that?
100%.
Fantastic. You want to follow Kevin on Twitter at Kevin_Indig, Facebook, Kevin.Indig, LinkedIn, Kevin Indig. So you got all the brands pointing. Thank you very much, and good luck in your directorship of SEO over at Shopify. And if there's anything that we can do to help you guys, you let us know, okay?
You already did. Thank you so much, Aaron. That was fantastic.
All righty. Well, Edge of the Web is brought to you by Site Strategics. Want to check us out if you're interested in the agile digital marketing. Make sure you give us a call at 877-SEO for Web or 877-736-4932. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our get on the newsletter as well. We certainly want to let you know that we've got an ongoing newsletter each and every week covering who we talk to and what we discussed. Edge of the Web radio.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel if you'd like to be able to see these videos in vivid color from our studio. And we'd certainly appreciate a review on iTunes if you're feeling up to it. Again, thanks to our sponsor, Site Strategics. Make sure you check out all the must-see videos and everything over at edgeofthewebradio.com. That's edgeofthewebradio.com. We're going to be talking to Pedro Diaz here in the near future. And from all of us over at Edge of the Web, be safe, be well, and do not be a piece of cyber driftwood. We'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.